The Guns on Pegs podcast is brought to you by ITAP Group. Hello and welcome to the Guns on Pegs podcast. It's George Brown in Hampshire.
It's Avian in Cornwall.
It's Jake in Suffolk.
And it's Sam in Devon.
Well, good afternoon, gentlemen.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, all.
How are we all?
Very
Yeah,
good.
doing very well, thank you, Jake. Jake, you must have had a busy week, what with it being Cheltenham and all.
Yeah, it's been one of those where I can't back myself out of a paper bag, to be honest with you. I've had a terrible week, but I mean we're flat racing, so it's just nice to watch a really good festival of jumps. There's been some great races. Tuesday was fantastic, wasn't it? No one saw really Constitution Hill falling like he did, but then that whole champion hurdle was epic. But yeah. My tip for the week is never eat yellow snow. I think that's the best one, and just leave it at that chance.
Is that a racing tip or just a general weather tip for this time of year?
No. It's just don't put your house on it and never eat yellow snow. It's a life tip. But the breeding season's going well. Everyone who's involved in thoroughbred breeding right now is flat out busy. There's a lot of coverings going on through all the sheds up and down the country. The team's working tirelessly and endlessly on the foalings. Everyone's just middle of the season. It's a busy week. It's a busy month, and it will pan out towards May and June. So but it's good. Thanks for asking, George. How's everything with you? You've had some really exciting stuff going on.
Well, yeah, obviously we talked on the podcast the other day about the food channel on Scribehound launching. It's all going really, really well, really encouraging. Interestingly enough, I've had approaches from several of the people already writing on the countryside channel asking if they're also allowed to write on the food channel. That's going to be great. Really see how that goes. I think people listening to this will be most familiar with one of the food writers called Valentine Warner, who is a super keen fisherman, multidisciplinary fisherman, big wild food advocate and all that sort of thing, likes cooking outside with fire and all that kind of stuff. So I sat next to him the other day and we had a lot of fun talking about salmon fishing and all that kind of thing. So it was great. But it's all going fantastically well, keeping us very busy. But listen, chaps, I've got a question for you. Well, specifically for Avian, actually, because you're the one with the most hands-on pheasant keeping knowledge and experience. Have you ever had any of your pheasant poults get the gapes?
Not last season, but yes, we have, unfortunately.
Yes. So I went out to feed my chickens on Saturday and thought that my bantam cockerel was looking a bit peaky. He was just sort of standing in the run with his head tucked under his wing at about sort of, midday. And I thought that's unusual. And I stood and watched him for a minute and he absolutely 100% has the gapes. So I've been treating him with whatever it's called.
You've got the baycocks going.
It's called Fluben.
That's it, Fluben vet. Yes.
Yeah. So it's tracheal worms, which sounds deeply unpleasant.
They do look very, very sorry for themselves when they've got it, don't they?
Yeah.
Bedraggled.
Yes, and just very sleepy, off his feed, all the rest of it. But he's looking much better now. So I was a bit worried for a minute, but they've all been wormed to within an inch of their life now.
I think the key thing, if you look, I follow the Haygates feeding regimen off their website, which is brilliant. And I think we found the key to it is making sure you break that worm breeding cycle. So they recommend that you feed with the med pellet or however you medicate them in the water or whatever. Allow them to go through that phase and then make sure you repeat it within 3 weeks.
Oh, really? Yeah, that makes sense.
And I think it's the repeat, because the problem is you get one or two with the gape with the worm, it comes out in their feces, that can then go into the soil and then be re-ingested, and that's how it will then spread through the whole flock. Yeah. Whereas if you can break that breeding cycle period of 3 weeks, it just stops the vector, it sort of starves them of whatever it is the worms need to propagate. And we've followed that absolutely religiously this season just gone, and touch wood, we didn't have a single problem with it. And I think the big issue on small shoots is when everybody's in doing the feeding rotors, we used to have an absolute nightmare trying to say to people, no, you must only put the medicated in this week, and then we'll have 2-3 weeks without it, and then we must do it again, because they go down and go, well, I couldn't find any medicated, so I just chucked some stuff in. And you're like, you've broken broken the whole cycle. The whole thing's gone to hell. That's why they're all yellow poo and looking gormless.
Yeah, and how are preparations on the shoot for you, Avian? Have you got stuck in yet, or are you?
Yeah, a couple of the lads. We've been really, really lucky. We've full support this year again. All but one of the guns have come back, taking full guns. We've kept our beating team happy. We just had our shoot dinner at the local pub a couple of weeks back. So many tall tales were told there. Got our first work day on Saturday, so everyone's promised to be there. So we'll see who's actually going to turn up. And I've been doing some utterly terrible hedge laying, but it's a start.
Good. Hedge laying is a thing I really want to have a crack at. Every time I drive past one of our hedges on the farm, I reckon that probably hasn't been laid for 30 years.
Yeah, a bit like me, George.
Somewhere.
But I mean, there's one of our drives where I'm absolutely convinced that birds run out the end of it because the hedge hasn't been laid.
Yes.
And I think even if I just did sort of a 100-yard section of that hedge, it would make a massive difference.
It doesn't take long. I think, where we are, no hedging has been done at all, dairy farm. So when they do the flailing in the autumn and the winter, they'll just take the face off.
Mm.
So that's meant it's all gone leggy and the whole bottoms of the hedgerows have died out. So the hard thing we've got at the moment is there's not very much density of hazel sticks and what have you to actually bring down. So it's all a bit patchy. So we're thinking that we've pleached over quite a lot and staked it crudely this year because we haven't got a lot to work with. It's a bit like Jake trying to grow his afro back. There's not much raw material to work there with. But we're hoping sort of year on year that will start to thicken up and bit by bit we can start improving that density. And the aim is obviously to try and get the bottom of the hedges thicker and maybe get some wild birds in to top up our small number of poults we can afford.
Yeah, nice. And Sam, what's been keeping you busy?
It's finally started feeling a bit like spring, hasn't it, chaps? The sun's
That's
come
right,
out,
yes.
The ground's dried up a bit, been out sorting out some fences, patching a few bits up, making sure all is good. It's nice to get out in a field without being up to your knees in mud. Caught up with some pigeons and, the standard putting goats back where they should be. So, yeah. But in the sunshine for a change, which has been nice.
That's good. Yep.
Yeah.
And Jake, have you been out and about doing things, or has it just been, pedal to the metal work-wise?
I've been really lucky. I got a bit of roost shooting in the other evening and had an hour there and got invited to a vermin day on a local estate, which was really good fun, actually. It was just a nice few hours out with some of the beaters and the keeper, and we just shot into a load of drays and just went around, and 47 squirrels later.
Well done.
We had a
Wow.
good, yeah, and it was actually 3 to my gun, and so that puts me, I think, on Top Gun on the old Squirrel Cup. Some of you may remember an article on Scribehound written by Dick and Jordan, who's and about the Squirrel Cup, which involves Mr. Dogs on Pegs himself and a couple of the other Order of the Garter members. And so, yeah, I'm leader, I think, at the moment on this. It's one of those where I'm going to try and win it this year. So
Good man. I mean, we had a chat about that, Jake, didn't we, about roost shooting. I know Sam's been out having a go as well. And I just wonder, I've got a feeling that there must be a bit of maybe it's a conspiracy theory, but I have a feeling that the traditional roost shoot was invented by the cartridge manufacturers to make sure that we basically emptied the cupboards before spring and we started getting on crop protection. Because I think 10 to 1 or even 20 to 1 is fairly good odds for shooting a high wind roost.
When you think, well, I'm not really going to shoot again until, October, November, you do get a bit demob happy, don't you?
Yes. I think you also forget how averagely you tended to shoot during the season and those 80-yard tumbling wood pigeons, I'll have a go at that.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel it's a bit like, when you finish skiing or snowboarding, that last day you hit that run and you're like, oh, I can't believe I'm going home. I've just finally cracked it. It's a bit like the shooting season. You hit that really high pigeon, that long cross pheasant or something, and you think, brilliant. and then you go roost shooting and you get reminded that you are.
You get very ambitious, I think.
You do indeed. Yeah. I must tell you a quick story. It's playing with Toby in the front room the other day, and doing a bit of a dance and everything. He's there, all embarrassed, and I said, "Tobes, it is a parent's prerogative to embarrass their child. You know, it's just you. When you grow up, you'll be able to do the same." And so, cold-heartedly, he just looks at me and he says, "Daddy, you embarrass me every time you shoot."
Wow.
And I was like, I chased him up the stairs, did a slam onto the bed, did a bit of WWE on him, and just reminded him who's a big dog, you know.
Wow. That is
I thought that was pretty harsh from a 9-year-old.
That's clay pigeon shooting rights revoked, I think.
Yes.
Massively above his station, but witty for a 9-year-old. But it's all been rather good since we last spoke, actually, chaps. Yeah, everything's going along okay. I think we're all doing rather well.
Excellent. Right. So, should we have a drink?
Oh,
yeah,
definitely. Yes. It's been one of those weeks, isn't it?
Yes, please.
Okay. Sam, you can go first. Tell us what's that you're drinking.
I have got, George, you'll be proud. I went to a Waitrose.
Well done.
And I have got a Innocent Gun Caribbean rum cask Scottish red beer. And we're trying to get the sound effect.
That sounds rather good.
It is. It's very nice. It's punchy. It's 6.8%. And if I manage to finish it without falling off my chair, I've got myself a Hawkstone Session Lager, which is only 4%. But Clarkson would be proud of me. Chase it down with that.
So this is just I'm not entirely clear on what this is. So it's a beer, sort of a standard sort of bitter or whatever, that has then been aged in a rum cask. Is that right?
Matured in Caribbean rum casks for spiciness and richness of flavour, aromas of rum, demerara, dried fruits and spice, warming malt character with hints of vanilla and oak. And I definitely didn't just read that off the bottle.
Come on. The first really swally down. What's it really like?
It is very nice, actually. It tastes strong, though, so it is potentially dangerous.
Jake, how about you?
So, chaps, I'm still on the haven't had a drink since 1st of February. So, and I'm highly unlikely have a drink probably till the game fair because peer pressure at the game fair. But so I am on a blackberry and blueberry martini with a hint of bitters extract.
Sounds a lot like a drink.
Yeah, it does. It just sounds like something that J2O produced. But very much still on that health kick, trying to lose a bit of weight and get fit for this London to Paris ride, which I'll mention in a little while. But so it's nothing exciting, chaps. Just a bit of blackberry, bit of blueberry juice thrown in together, and we're all good. What about you, Ave? What are you drinking?
Well, I was saying to the chaps earlier, I was up George's neck of the woods on Tuesday, went up to see an old mate of mine, and we try and do it a few times a year, and we just picked a pub roughly halfway between us. I'm Cornwall, he's London, and I discovered the Butcombe pubs.
Right.
And we picked one of their inns just outside of Andover, and they had their Tall Tales Pale Ale, which we seem to drink most of. Only 4.5%, very, very refreshing pale ale, very pleasant. But I like the fact that it's called Tall Tales because it was apparently inspired by the mysterious tale of a crocodile being spotted in the River Avon in Bristol. I haven't gone into too much detail about that yet, but I might have to come back to you. But no, it's very nice.
Well, is this like the big cat that was spotted on the motorway that turned out to be a leopard print dressing gown?
I think it probably will be. It's going to be a misshapen log or some kind of swimming pool toy or something or other. But we had that. I think there was it in off the north coast of Cornwall where the people had a video of crocodiles swimming up the beach, and it turned out to just be the waves lapping on some rocks. I think people are not very good at knowing what they're seeing, and I think pareidolia is strong with us, isn't it?
So funny.
And George, what about you, mate? What do you want?
Yeah, well, I have got a gin and tonic, and it is a Newmarket gin, which is in my house because a certain Mr. Jake Wolf brought it with him as a kind gift when he came to shoot with us here. So it's Newmarket gin. It's the fancy Mediterranean tonic from whatever they're called with a slice of orange in it, and it's very nice. You mentioned it's been feeling a bit spring-like. It was spring-like here for about a week, and it's gone back to quite wintry. It's about 3 degrees out there at the minute, so it does feel a little bit incongruous, but it's going down very nicely indeed. I might have to go and get a top-up in a minute.
Very good. I'm glad you're enjoying it there, George. It's a definite a dangerous one. You get stuck into that bottle, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's really, really nice.
Brilliant.
Right, boys. So you will remember in the previous episode, we had a missive from Lancelot who was asking about whether he should, or he and his friend from university should buy and split up this pair of old English side-by-sides. And I've got an update for you. Lancelot's been in touch. Actually, Sam, you go on. You read the missive from Lancelot.
So, Lancelot writes, "Thank you for featuring my conundrum on the pod. It made my morning in the office slightly less tedious. I'm also feeling very privileged to be a new member of the prestigious Order of the Garters. Here's an update on the pair. First of all, I didn't realise how out of touch I sounded in my email. To provide some context, I am a student. However, I'm in my industry placement year and saving some money by living at home. Furthermore, the pair was very reasonably priced, I'm telling myself, at under £2,000, and I have since purchased both of them for myself. I couldn't bring myself to break them up, and they will hopefully hold their value better together. And for a clue as to where I'm studying, fuck Cirencester. Best regards, And I would just say, if Lancelot's mate is feeling a bit left out now, there are currently 7 pairs of 12-bore side locks on Holt's Auctions, 25th of March, between £1 and £2,000. So get on there and get bidding, and you possibly end up with 14 new guns if you're not careful.
Do you know what? I had a look. There's some serious bargains.
Some crackers on there.
There are, yeah.
There's a pair of AYA number ones at like estimated price $2,000 to $3,000. I mean, that is, I think, phenomenal.
Yeah.
26-inch barrels, so you've got to, take that into account. But I mean, they just look fantastic.
Yeah, there's some really good bargains on there, aren't there? I mean, there's a pair of William Evans box lock ejectors for 1,000 to 1,500 quid.
I saw that. They look really cool. They really do.
And if you wanted to go to the dark side, there's even a pair of Maruku high pheasants for $2,000 to $3,000.
Yeah,
that's not far off what they go for. What are they? $12,000 Marukus, something like that. The fancy ones.
Yeah. That's good value. Actually,
they are pretty good.
So I thought we'd move from Lancelot onto the topic of conversation that his original email sparked off, which was the idea of this RAU pentathlon. I think we've all been giving some thought to what the event ought to entail. Who would like to give their five event program for the Cirencester Pentathlon first? Go on, Jake, you go.
Okay, chaps. So here's mine. I kind of went modern pentathlon, but I went with a bit of an extreme feel. So fencing, out of the 5 would be ice axe combat in Norway. I must admit, chaps, if you Google extreme combat, it's the first thing that comes up. But or you could go a little bit more kind of left field and go the Zulu style combat, one-on-one with the Ikwala and the Ishalangu. With the shield and the spear, basically. Thank you very much, George. Yeah, I saved the clicks and the. It was, so that was fencing. Both look pretty extreme, and shooting would be a solo elk stalk with a solo drag and extract. So that would be very, very tough. So riding, easy Mongol derby. Run, marathon de sablers. I think that is probably the most testing marathon. There are so many ultras. People are doing more and more crazy running things these days, but marathon de sables is
I think that's up there, mate, isn't it? My brother's done that one.
Oh, really?
Yeah, did it a few years ago. I think it cost him all his toenails.
Easily. I know a couple of people, one of them finished, one of them sadly didn't, and it just took everything out of them. So it's not on my radar.
No, he's never been the same since.
When you say one of them sadly didn't, it sounds like they're still in the desert.
He hasn't answered my email, so he may still be there. Yeah, and then the swim. It's got to be a given, hasn't it? It's got to be the English Channel. Do the Channel swim 26 miles. It's a brilliant one. But chaps, in true uni style, each discipline ends with the downing of a pint. and you're not finished until you've done. And a pint of description, whether it be dirty, whether or not it'll just be a pint of IPA, you've got to down a pint at the end of it. Keep the uni kind of feel going. So that's me, chaps. What about you, Sam? What about you, buddy?
So I went with the classic pentathlon, which starts with a jump, and I went for tombstoning off St John's Head in Orkney, which is the highest point in the UK, 1,128 feet. Then we do the discus, which I thought we could do exhibition style shooting, throwing clays in the air by hand and then shooting them. For a foot race, I thought, maybe both of them together, running through a group of hinds during the red rut, just to see which one of them the stag pushes away first. Could be entertaining. Javelin, I was thinking spearfish or stingray. And then wrestling. As you do.
Hang on, that didn't go down too well for some celebrities. So let's just
be dangerous, isn't it?
Put a warning on that one there, buddy.
If somebody, snuffs it at Challenge 4, then obviously the other guy's won, hasn't he? So
absolutely.
Survival of the fittest. And then wrestling, I wanted to see the man v kangaroo, similar to the video of the bloke who rescues his dog.
Rescued his dog.
From a kangaroo by fighting it. And yeah, if one of them makes it to the end of all of that, then
they deserve a pair of guns.
I think they deserve a pair of guns, definitely.
Okay, Avian, go on then.
Well, I did a couple. So I did one that was very much Cirencester based, sort of appealed to my inner nerd. So again, going with the classic pentathlon. So for jumping, there's Cirencester Skydiving Club. So we throw you out of a perfectly serviceable aircraft. For discus, there's Dean's Ultimate Frisbee, which is a bit down the road from Cirencester, edge of the New Forest of Forest of Dean. For a foot race, you do the 100k Cotswolds Ultra Marathon. For the javelin, I'm sure we've all seen that weird-looking building off the side of the M5, that vast green and white incinerator building. Well, that's actually known as the Javelin Park Incinerator. So apparently that burns 190,000 tonnes of household waste a year, which is 520 tonnes a day. So I thought the challenge for the javelin would be shovel a day's worth onto the conveyor and then finish up with the wrestling. Sadly now defunct, but there was the Cirencester Wrestling Federation, who named as one of its fighters the Big D Thunderous Brawler, a 400-pound hulk of a man. Wow. And that would all be fueled by Muddy Welly's Golden Ale, which I think was done as a fundraiser by the students at the Agricultural College to raise some funds for the Student Union.
Nice.
Well, there you go. That's a good one. Yeah. You said you did two, though, Avian.
Yeah, so I thought, well, if it is the RAC, then maybe they need something a little bit more field oriented. So I thought we'd do the modern style pentathlon and go for number one. You diagnose a Land Rover Series 2 electrical fault in the rain in a muddy field. Then for two, you'd have to fix a stuck ejector on a knackered old Lander in the middle of a hot drive. Challenge 3 is to see if you can slip a black powder cartridge into the hose pocket without being detected. Challenge 4 is correctly identify the liquid in a randomly proffered hip flask on the gun bus. And 5 is chase down an unruly spaniel that's bolted after a deer without swearing.
Oh, well, that makes it all much harder, doesn't it?
It sounds almost like a normal shoot day in Cornwall.
It does sound like our shoots in general, yeah.
Well, so my suggestion is very much in a similar vein to Avian's. I'd sort of tried to go with an agric rural vibe. So I have got as event one the bale toss. You have to toss a bale of straw over the forks of a telehandler, and in the manner of the high jump, we just keep raising it until somebody fails.
Brilliant.
Then there's the reversing a trailer obstacle race.
Yeah, like that.
Yeah.
Then pheasant plucking, speed and style points for that. So you get a penalty for every tear in the skin, that sort of thing. Yeah. Then a classic welly wanging, pure distance.
Welly wang. Yep.
And then finish off with the cross-country pub crawl, which is akin to steeplechasing or point-to-point, but on foot, straight line, over ditch, hedge, and rail in between pubs. Ideally in wellies, I think.
Perfect. Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
And then I thought we might need a tiebreaker, so we've got the mullet shake with points awarded for length, luster, and artistic impression.
I mean, whoever thought the mullet would make a strong comeback?
Well,
especially
yes.
in the agricultural community.
Absolutely. Did it ever go away in the agricultural community?
Maybe not.
So
Like it
sticking
to-
on this original story, Avian, I gather you're in the market for a new gun.
Don't tell the wife, but I'm always in the market for a new gun. No, it's something somebody pointed out to me on Facebook the other day. So you remember as kids, I'm sure they still do it now, but every little local gift shop had those racks of key rings and mugs and little door plates and everything with people's names on.
Yeah.
Oh yes.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So having a very run-of-the-mill name like Avian, right from a small kid, I think I'm emotionally scarred and damaged that obviously there was never, ever, ever an Avian on any of those ever. And it was always very disheartening. I think that's what made me realise that maybe not half the world is called Avian after all. But Caesar Guerini, towards the end of this year, are launching their new field gun, and it is called and engraved the Avian.
Wow.
Awesome.
So I feel there is a space in the cabinet, and I do think that it's time to absolutely shamelessly ask and beg and fawn and hope for somebody out there with links to the good chaps at Caesar Guerini who may be able to sort of provide me with one, even just to play with, so we can review it on the pod and do whatever else is needed from the PR side of things. Failing that, I'm going to have to launch a crowdfunder, I'm afraid.
Definitely
What
more
is
expensive than
what
a
is
fridge
the
magnet.
RRP on a Caesar Guerini Avian?
It hasn't been formally announced yet, but it's looking like the low price of $3,000.
Oh, wow.
So I don't think
didn't
it's
expect that.
bank breaking,
Okay.
but it does
I
look
was
rather
almost going
pretty.
to say, I was going to say there, Georgia, if you have to ask, you can't afford. But because it looks amazing, like the scroll on it looks really good. The walnut, the wood looks
Yeah.
really lovely on the pictures and everything. So I mean, but $3,000, that's achievable. And
It does look
If we do
doable.
a water aid style appeal, that if every listener just gave £2,
There you go.
Avian would be able to have a gun with
I
his
could
name
have
on
them.
it.
I mean,
hang on a minute, chaps. I put my hand up about some field clothing the other day and got slated for it. Now we're on for the guns. I mean, Abe, what do your toes look like? People want some of the gun.
I think OnlyFans wouldn't even get me a cartridge. But no, I mean, come on, chaps. I've spent all these years never having anything monogrammed, and by pure fate, the very thing I was looking for, a new shotgun, comes out with my name on it. It is kismet, isn't it? Has to be mine.
It's
Didn't
fate.
Coca-Cola do the thing where you could have your own label put on if it was a bit unusual, rather than the run-of-the-mill ones that they ran? Can we get
No,
into those
definitely not.
instead?
No,
They did
no,
actually.
absolutely not. It's only shotgun stuff.
And I'm almost certain that Avian's a fair whiz at Photoshop. Is this something that you've done?
It isn't
Well,
actually.
you
It
can
our
ask
good-
AI to do it now, can't you?
It was our
Yeah,
good friend
ChatGPT,
Freddie who put that one up from Order of the Garters. So as far as I know, it is real. And it
Looks
come on,
certainly
chap.
real.
I mean, a friend of mine did say it's almost a bit like having your name embroidered in the back of your gym shorts. And I suppose in some ways, if I did accidentally leave it on the back of the gun bus, there wouldn't be any point of saying whose gun is this and it's got my name on it. So my mum said, so I didn't lose it. But come on, chaps, let's see what we can do. Yeah.
No, I agree. And let's make it when we all shoot together. Let's get Caesar Greeny to bring 4 guns, not just one for yourself, old boy.
Absolutely.
And,
Guns
and then
on
we'll
pegs
try that.
day.
Yeah, guns on
Guns on
pegs.
pegs
Yeah, let's do
this
it. Let's do it.
So
Those
we
guys,
want
Caesar
an
Greeny.
Avian, a George, a Sam, and a Jake.
And a Chris.
And a Chris.
And a Chris.
Well, no, they only do over and under, so Chris wouldn't be interested. Or has he come to the dark side, George?
Chris he's fully embraced the dark side. He's using more often than not now. He uses a
Is
Rizzini,
he?
whatever it is, which I think he quite likes. So yeah, he's gone down in my estimation. Right, good. So guys, I thought the episode just gone with Tim Weston was really interesting, particularly on the topic of introductions and reintroductions and translocations of animals. And one of the things about those episodes is, I often feel that we never quite have enough time to explore the topic in quite as much detail as maybe it would be fun to. So, Avian, I know that you had some thoughts off the back of that that you wanted to raise.
Yeah.
Do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, I mean, I think there was one bit was said on the pod with Tim that NGO's attitude is the right species in the right place at the right time with the right monitoring. Well, certainly that makes sense, but I think if you look, I guess headline reintroduction rewilding is just another name for managing the land. So it's a different set of approaches, different way of doing things. But I think if you look at anywhere in the world where human beings have introduced or reintroduced species, it's never had the outcome that people thought it would. And I think if you take rabbits in Australia or Japanese knotweed here, or most of these ecosystems have had either major predators or certain species out of them for a period of many years. And how do we know what adding that back in is going to do to alter the balance that's re-established in those areas? I mean, I think you pointed out, George, that when the roe deer were pretty much wiped out, when was that, back 1800s, 1900s?
Yeah, so I was reading a bit about this the other day, and at some point, back in the mist of time, they were reclassified from beasts of the forest to beasts of the warren, which meant they weren't protected in the same way as, say, red deer would have been. They weren't reserved for the hunting of by the aristocracy or whatever. So it sort of became a free for all on roe deer, and so they were hunted nearly to extinction. Sort of by around the 18th century, they were pretty much gone from quite big chunks of England and Britain. But there was a sort of little remnant population in, I think, the Lake District and Scotland and that sort of thing, but sort of in the southeast and quite a lot of East Anglia and that sort of thing, there were just no roe deer left. So they then started a program of reintroductions in the 19th century, and I think the most notable one was sort of in the Thetford Chase, where Centre Parks is now, kind of in the 1880s. And now, there's roe deer absolutely everywhere. I mean, it's arguably too successful a reintroduction.
Yeah.
And it goes to show that, too much hunting, bad thing, not enough hunting, also bad, in the absence of, the big predators, which is another kettle of fish.
Yes. Well, I think, the other risk is, I was doing some work on Google with this, and I know we've all seen the stories of the lynx being reintroduced into Scotland illegally, and there's a group throughout the southwest who are just letting beavers go left, right, and centre. And I think Tim's point that when people look at the groups are looking at doing these releases and decide that the rules are too hard, so they're just going to do it anyway, there is quite a lot of what's called guerrilla rewilding happening. And it's not just the sort of the halo species, the pine martens and the boar and the beavers. There are people out there with, in many ways, quite understandable passions for certain species, whether it's insect, animal, plant, whatever is their thing, that they feel should be put back into the environment because it was there hundreds, thousands of years ago, and human beings have wiped it out. And they're just getting on and doing it. So there's no control over it. There's an awful lot of concern over, what kind of parasites and diseases might these animals bring into, another environment. Obviously, if you've got an introduction that proves to be successful, well, by the very nature of resources, it's going to have to push something out, or, either by predation or just by taking over a niche in a habitat. So, it's all very laudable in, a very narrow view, but without that overall control, there's no way of sort of zooming out and saying, well, it's a bit more complicated than that. And I think, as Tim said, if there is no method to manage it, if it doesn't go the way you think it should, well, how the hell do you stop it? I think I shared with you today, George, wasn't there? There's in Holland, they're now, the EU are looking at winding back the protection on wolves, because that's slowly, without them admitting to it, that's slowly getting out of hand.
Yeah.
But where does the line get drawn, though? Because you've got people that want to reintroduce the lynx to this country because the lynx was here 1,300 years ago. 1,300 years ago, we didn't have Sika, muntjac, or Chinese water deer. So are those people suggesting that because they weren't here 1,300 years ago, we should eradicate that as a species? Basque reckon there's over 2,000 non-native species in the British
Exactly.
Isles. Which
Wow, is
I
it
know
that many?
that's mammals, birds, plants, insects, reptiles, everything. But you can't
Still
be
a lot,
looking
isn't
at
it?
eradicating all of those things, can you?
No.
Well, eradication is extraordinarily hard.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you say about the roe deer, we've got muntjac aren't being eradicated, and you're basically free for all on those, aren't you?
Yeah.
So
I mean, they did eradicate coypu, didn't they, from the Broads?
Yes.
But
that was only a very, very small release population, and I think they were very, very particular about the habitat.
I think
they
it
were
still
being,
took.
and that was a massive project.
I think it took 10 or 15 years, didn't it?
Yes.
It took a long time. And then even is it Stoats on Orkney?
Yeah.
That's ongoing as far as I'm aware, and
Yeah.
millions of pounds spent to do that. So I think eradication is just impossible.
And I think, was it Jurassic Park where nature will find a way? Because is it the Isle of Man where that grey squirrel has just arrived, turned up on the island, hasn't been one there for decades, and they're up in arms now. They want to release it back into the wild because it's a fluffy, cuddly thing. And obviously, grey squirrel release is illegal. So, which law do you abide by?
Yeah, I mean, the other one though, the other way of looking at this is, there have been wild boar in the Forest of Dean for a long time now, and we did manage to eradicate them before, and all we really had at that point was spears. I think this is what Tim was saying. We had pointy sticks. If they wanted to get rid of them, we could. If we wanted to get rid of the thermal imagery and high-powered rifles and night scopes and all this stuff, we could. It would just cost a lot of money, and then
it would take a lot of political will, wouldn't it?
People would have. That's the point, isn't it? You'd have to have very difficult PR exercise to explain why you were going to kill all the nice, friendly piggies.
Yes, and I think that a lot of this always harks back to for rewilding the two things. It's the wolves at Yellowstone. Well, that's all very nice to talk about, but I don't think we could really in our heads factor in how big an empty Yellowstone is. And also in Scotland, the rewilding and what have you there is they all talk about the Caledonian forest, which I think it's debatable whether that ever existed, and certainly not in the sort of Elysian Fields view that the rewilders have. So if they're going off a poor premise to start with, they're doing it without checks and balances, and there's no easy route to correct it if it goes wrong. I don't know.
Well, I think there's also a bit of a welfare issue. I was at a book launch on Tuesday this week. Matt Ridley, Viscount Ridley's new book, which is all about black grouse and lecking and how that behaviour might have come about he's a geneticist, so how all that might have come about from a genetic perspective. But at this book launch was a scientist who has been studying black grouse. His name was Carl, and I can't remember his surname now. But he's been studying black grouse in Finland, and he was telling me about a proposed project to reintroduce black grouse in Sussex. At one point, they'd have been, they are a lowland bird, really, but we now associate them with the uplands because those are the only spaces that are really big enough and undisturbed enough for populations of black grouse to really manage. And he was saying that although it's actually the 100-acre wood, Ashdown Forest is where where it was proposed, but he was saying that there's just so much disturbance that it's really pretty well impossible. And then I mentioned that there was an idea that there were enough sort of ducal landowners between Peppering and Winchester on the South Downs that you could pretty well link them all up, all of these estates up for grey partridge restoration. And he said yes, but in that sort of 100-kilometre distance, that's really only big enough for 2 black grouse lecks.
Really?
Wow.
The hens travel, up to 40 kilometres from where they're born to find a new lek. So it gives you an idea about the kind of space that they're required. So if you're then reintroducing these birds into a space that's not really big enough and is, teeming with dog walkers,
yes,
it's not necessarily a particularly ethical thing to do, as much as we might like to have them down here.
I mean, what are your thoughts, George? Because it strikes me that a lot of the reintroductions are either based on, the big sexy predators, or creatures and plants that are pretty much on the absolute extremes of their natural ranges. I know there was talk of many years ago about whether pandas should be protected because they suck up such enormous resources to keep what's basically an animal that's doing everything it possibly can to go extinct, and we're sort of prolonging the agony. But, we look at, for example, the woodcock story. There's a hell of a lot of soul searching about whether and when we shoot woodcock in the UK, and we are right on the very edges of their breeding territory. So yes, protecting the local breeding stock is one thing, but in their sort of heartland ranges through Northern Europe and East Asia and what have you, there's absolutely no shortage of them whatsoever. So are we diverting scarce resources to protecting animals that are struggling like hell to exist in this environment anyway, where we perhaps should be looking at supporting abundant native species who are struggling like hell? And you think maybe curlews and lapwing, for example, rather than trying to protect these sort of outliers that are struggling like hell. What do you think?
Well, you have to ask the question about why they're not here in in the first place. And I know a lot of it will be down to human intervention and habitat loss and things like that. But habitat loss continues to happen. We lose 6,000 hectares a year of agricultural land to development. Well, it's not getting any better for these animals.
We're not making any more land, are we?
Exactly. So
definitely
why are we then trying to reintroduce them as if the landscape was like it was 1,000 years ago? It's just not gonna happen, is it?
No.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about the loss of habitat, and they're not making any more of it. And I guess this is perhaps where some of the rewilders may have a point, which is if you put a big fence around something and say, okay, well, this bit's for nature now, then perhaps you are preserving some of that habitat for posterity. But then the other aspect of the whole thing comes in, which is the human aspect. And I do find myself very conflicted about it. In my gap year, I spent 2 months working on a place in South Africa called Shamwari, which is a massive rewilding project. And it's actually the same bloke behind one of the first Scottish ones. What was the one where they wanted to release wolves really early on? Allerdale.
Allerdale, yes.
Same bloke behind it. And they put a fence around this absolutely vast bit of South Africa, huge in the Eastern Cape. And, we spent a lot of time, sort of doing anti-erosion work that was erosion caused by overgrazing. And, you can see that, intensive agriculture like that had a very negative impact. And seeing the plains green up and all these herds of impala and all the rest of it, it was pretty inspiring. I read Isabella Tree's book and found that pretty inspiring as well. But what a lot of the sort of theoretical rewilders, I guess I'd call them, often fail to take into account is the human impact. And wolves are cool. Well, undeniably cool. Lynx are cool. It would be cool to have them about.
Yes.
Until it's your sheep or your dog
or your dog, or your
whatever.
Children.
Yeah, we're talking children now. And George, you said it very well. Who's going to pay for this? In the last episode when you were chatting with Tim, there was whose door does it fall at when your sheep go missing? When your horses go missing, who's going to pay for all of this?
Even if you've ring fenced a block though, and you've gone, right, we're going to rewild this block, we're going to chuck some deer in, we're going to chuck some lynx in, we're going to chuck this in, chuck that in. You're still going to have human intervention because one species is going to take over. You're either going to end up with too many herbivores and you're going to end up with overgrazing, and on welfare grounds, that's not going to be good for them. Or you're not going to have enough, and then the predators take over and then they're going to run out of things to eat. And again, you're posing a welfare issue. There's got to be human intervention, which is what a lot of people don't understand.
I think you're right, because I think, certainly in the UK, I challenge anyone to show me some truly wild country that has never seen the hand of man and is therefore unmanaged.
Yeah.
I just don't think it exists. And the other question, I suppose, is how many? At what point is this line drawn? I mean, how many lynx did the UK support? How many beavers did the UK support? Were they common animals, or were they, again, peculiar outliers that have just caught the passionate imagination of the rewilding crowd?
And what date are we drawing the line? There was something a couple of weeks ago about somebody who wants to bring back the woolly mammoth, which
Yes.
Well, now
is...
de-extinctioning is it's fascinating, but I mean,
Yeah.
come on, let's focus on the ones we still have rather than trying to. But
Agreed.
and
Just
I don't
because
know.
you can
Park
doesn't
there,
mean you
yeah.
should.
Yes, and the bringing back the woolly mammoth's a really interesting one from an ethical standpoint as well, because obviously the idea is to grow the embryo inside an elephant. So, but elephants and presumably mammoths were herd animals. So
Yes.
then you have one woolly mammoth which thinks it's an elephant.
Yes, it's like the bad old days of the lonely rhino in the zoo, isn't it?
Yeah. So it
Yeah.
just feels like there's all sorts of slightly peculiar questions that you have to answer that I just don't see a particularly good way around. I mean, they're all interesting conversations, and there were guys trying to sort of back engineer the aurochs, which is sort of a big angry wild cow.
Yes.
And the guys behind that were these chaps called the Heck brothers, who were Nazis. So there's some weird politics involved with some of this as well.
I think, that's the problem, isn't it? It's kind of that niche passion that seems to be driving a lot of this. There are people who have latched onto the idea that, take beavers, for example, that beavers will completely re-engineer a landscape and it'll be absolutely fantastic. But I think if you look on YouTube videos of anybody in the States who lives in beaver country, they spend most of their lives trying to unplug culverts under roads and stop farmland flooding and homesteads flooding. It produces an environment, but it doesn't necessarily reproduce the environment that the animals that live there now will thrive in. So it's
you just have no control, right?
Hand.
You have no control. They will definitely do some landscape engineering, some ecosystem engineering. You just don't know in where or in what way. And I guess you need to have some way of managing that situation. Sam, how close are you to the otter, which is where the first that was sort of one of the early guerrilla rewilding.
I've seen some of the work down there of the beaver restoration, if you could call it that, down there. And I've spoken to some farmers that farm down there, and not best pleased, I think, would be the only outcome from that. But it's driven. These things are driven by people who want to see, who have got a thing about one species.
Yeah.
And they don't look at a bigger picture with it all. You could, with beaver, with lynx. Niall Rowntree did a brilliant bit, which I think is on YouTube, about the white-tailed eagle up in Scotland, which, I think has been good for a few tourist boat operators who claim you can go out and see them, but has been, really detrimental to any livestock farmer up there that's having lambs taken. And they look in the nest afterwards and find that fish carcasses are few and far between, whereas they're eating lambs, foxes, domestic cats, anything, any easy, high protein, high fat meal. So it's, I think it's looking at the point why they're not there now. And then, like Tim said, is it really a good idea to reintroduce them? And I think a lot of the time, probably the answer is no.
Sam, I agree. And I think for me, it's if these predators are going to go for an easy target, you've just said it perfectly. They're going to go for their easy prey and the domesticated cats, the newborn lamb. Times have changed dramatically. And because of that, we can't ask an animal being reintroduced, when you were here 1,300 years ago, you were hunting on these. And so, but if you were
good links,
and now I don't, no back chatting, just head out there. You're not to take cats. And, it's that type of thing, isn't it? But Sam, you make a brilliant point.
During certain times of the year, you can eat these ones. During other times of the year, you can eat these. No, don't touch the little white woolly buggers.
On the other hand, just to play devil's advocate again, I think more often than not, the reason that, as it were, people on the land management, farming, field sports side of things have doubts about rewilding is because it's never made entirely clear, or maybe even thought about how to do the management.
Yes.
How, is there, okay, so yeah, fine, reintroduce your white-tailed eagles, but if I can show you a lamb that has been predated by the eagle, are you going to compensate me? How is it going to work?
Yeah.
That sort of thing. Okay, the beaver has set up shop in my bottom field, and now my bottom field is underwater and I can't graze it or can't grow crops in it or whatever.
Yes.
What are we going to do? How are we going to solve that problem? So I think that is the problem. And I think if those concerns were addressed, because I think people would be much more comfortable with it. And what I often see isn't, yes, I completely understand your position, and of course we will compensate you for your lost sheep. It's, oh, they won't take lambs.
Yeah.
It's just sort of a flat denial of it being a possibility, rather than, yes, we know that is a potential possibility, so here is our contingency plan for when that happens, or if that does happen, we will move the bird, or we will, whatever it is.
I think you're right, George. I think the other issue is potentially that it's done in a very sort of bipartisan way, that the ecologists are right and there's no other input, and I think we were sort of kicking the idea around that if there was a way to bring everything together to say, well, these things need managing, the landscape needs some investment into it. If it was a case that we said, well, what are we really after? Well, probably more species in an environment is a good thing. Well, if we can get back to a position where there are bigger numbers of wild birds, wild animals, what have you, and that we can get back to a position where there is a harvestable surplus of species that are currently on the banned list, well, that would probably get the buy-in from the landowners, and it's not then a nuisance species. I mean, I'm not advocating next year we go driven lapwing shooting, but there has to be sort of a broader benefit for all the stakeholders in it, and I think very often any view that we have from sort of ground level up is just kind of poo-pooed and ignored.
Yes, well, anecdotal evidence is not evidence, is it?
But then again, I saw some wonderful evidence. The RSPB, with a couple of professors from Cambridge University, who are part of the RSPB, they've just done a wonderful report that shows that if you've got a solar farm, or a solar farm managed for wildlife, which I think basically means they don't cut the grass, there are more species of birds in the unmanaged solar farm, but then they've correlated that to say that there are more species of birds than on arable farmland, and they took intensive arable land in the fens. So you've used lies, damn lies, and statistics to prove the story you want, which is kind of tilting towards unmanaged solar farms are better for the environment than farms.
I don't think we should put the words solar and farms together, but that's a completely different topic.
I mean, that's all very well and good. Like, maybe they are. Like,
Yes.
That's fine. But I would still like to have bread.
Food. Yes.
Yeah.
Agreed.
And I'd prefer it if that quite a lot of it wasn't coming from, say, Ukraine.
Yes.
Definitely.
But it's
that kind of thing. So
skewing the research to match your narrative, isn't it?
yes,
It is.
Right, chaps. I think there's a danger of us talking about this until tomorrow morning. So I'm going to ask us to wrap up. But before we do that, is there any other business?
Well, chaps, a little bit of kind of housekeeping, really. Thank you to everyone who has sent in some shoots that would like to host us in January for the Order of the Garter Shoot Day. Guys, some incredibly good and generous offers. Keep them coming in. We're not being greedy, but guys, brilliant. We'd love to. We've had some really, really good offers. So I'm looking forward to chatting with you chaps in the future about where we're going to go. And then, just a brief update, London to Paris. We've now got a support drive.
Well
I
done.
think you chaps, you chaps, didn't you say you're bringing a white van up and doing a booze cruise run with us as well? So, we've got you guys on board. We've got a team together. We've now got up to 5 cyclists, and so there's still 3 more places. We're going to take 8 people. We're doing it in 24 hours. We're going to leave on the 12th of September from the Guns on Pegs office, and we are going to cycle 24 hours and finish in Paris on the Saturday. If you're in Paris on that Saturday and you want to come and cheer us on around the Arc de Triomphe, please do, and to our French listeners as well. But guys, starting to get a bit of shape back again, starting to get on the turbo trainer and that type of stuff. So yeah, look out for us on the roads.
Well done, mate. So we'll be seeing your sponsorship forms coming around soon, will we?
Yeah, I don't know about how we're going to best do that. I mean, I've done a lot of charity work over the last decades and raised a lot of money. And I've also taken, I've kind of done the pockets of, friends, family and stuff like that. So, and while there are some new people that are coming along and doing this whole sponsorship thing with us, and it's always good, I think it's safe to say we're going to probably do the GWCT for their incredible work that they do. The Country Food Trust as well is another fantastic, which I am very, very fond of. But any ideas? If anyone's got ideas, please pod@gunsonpegs.com and some charity ideas that we can all do together. I don't know,
If everyone that donates £2 to Avian's gun appeal doubles their donation, then that
Sam,
can go
you're hired, mate. You are now my head of PR.
Very good indeed. But what about you? What about you, chaps? Have you any other business, gentlemen?
I've got just one bit I'd like to ask everyone. I think, we were saying right at the top that we're starting to get back out in the woods and get some work done and what have you. I think it'd be brilliant for all of the small shoots out there, all the little DIY syndicates and, the guys doing their best and the girls doing their best out there in the woodland. Would you all please just make a note of how many man hours or person hours you're actually spending in the countryside, doing the restoration work, looking after the wildlife, getting the place ready for your birds. Jot a note down, keep it somewhere. I haven't quite got to the point of thinking through how we collate all that information, but I just think it would be a wonderful thing to start considering adding to the Value of Shooting survey, to just say, what is the untapped, unmeasured volunteer work in terms of people hours spent in the countryside that adds to everything that shooting does and the field sports community does, supporting wildlife and nature in the country.
That's a very good idea.
Well said.
You just want to start another spreadsheet, I know you.
Oh, I can't wait, George.
He's itching. Absolutely itching for it.
My wife's so proud. She might even let me have another shotgun. That's the Caesar Guarini Avian, for anyone who didn't quite catch that at the top.
She'll let you have another shotgun as long as somebody else pays for it.
Well, yes.
You have a bartering tip. I've just thought about this, Ave.
Go on.
Claire is getting a Labrador this year.
Yes, she is.
So, for the same price, you could probably get 2 Labradors for 1 gun.
Yeah.
So, I'm just helping you here, buddy.
It doesn't sound like I'm getting any richer, Jake.
No, it sounds like you're going to get a lot poorer.
I think Jake just gave away his prices.
Fair play. Yeah, there we go.
Good. Okay, who's going to see us out then? I can't remember who did it last time, but one of you do it.
So, before we go, all that remains is for me to say the final reminder that you can get your hands on a pair of the exclusive Guns on Pegs podcast shooting sock garters by sending us your shooting dilemmas for us to resolve, or by sending us your unpopular opinions, or sharing your forgotten drives or your McPod suggestions. Just send us an email to pod@gunsonpegs.com, and if we read it out in the next episode, we'll send you some garters.
And don't forget to send in your challenge avians, and if you've got an RAU pentathlon itinerary,
yes,
do send that in as well, please. Right, well, thanks very much, chaps. That's your lot. Thanks very much for listening. Do keep sending in your follow-up thoughts. Chris and I will be back in a couple of weeks' time with another episode of the Guns on Pegs podcast. But for now, thanks very much for listening, and goodbye.